After Tespelin had been settled for sleep, which was already late, Yuzniel turned away. She spoke softly, "Sleep well, Tespelin, no matter what happens, we will overlook it. Things will return to normal, I am determined." A few days later, in the morning at the Colosseum, a loud voice echoed, "Do you know, Gale Harland? If you do, then sit quietly over there." 3 female students were shouting at Yuzniel's little sister. The girl with copper-colored hair was Lily Suni, pointing at Gale provocatively, "You seem quite proud when your sister dances with the Royal Highness, don't you?" Gale lowered her voice, bowing, "I've never been proud." Lily countered, crossing her arms, "Your mere existence here is already prideful." Yuzniel's sister trembled in fear, stammering, "That's..." They didn't know Yuzniel was present, witnessing everything. She muttered, "What's going on here?" Then she angrily shouted at the girls bullying Gale, "Hey! What are you doing?" Yuzniel approached the girl who had just threatened Gale, her cold gaze making her sweat nervously. Gale, seeing her sister, began to whimper and call for Yuzniel's help. Yuzniel tried to calm herself, "Stay calm, Yuzniel, but..." "I can't be calm anymore." Her eyes were truly furious. Yuzniel looked at the girls in front of her, thinking silently, today is just like any other day. A week earlier, she had received a letter from Nud, saying that his workplace had been relocated. Therefore, his role in assisting Yuzniel within the aristocratic circles might become more challenging for a while. There would be a gathering at the Duke Lanch's house this week. Whom should she go with? Recently, there has been a study on magic being suppressed, and I've had to work overtime for several days straight. When I received support from Nud, I became even more confused. Everything was quite chaotic and busy. She rested her weary head in her office, thinking, should I contact Ather? But no, Ather has been busy with swordsmanship training lately. He politely declined my request earlier, citing his busy schedule at the palace. Besides, even if Ather were free, he would have to go with Eugene, wouldn't he? Isn't Nud the heir to the Suni family? And a royal knight like Ather would receive communication at any time. It's strange how high-ranking nobles have become so busy. She suddenly remembered how Tez doted on her, always calling her my Yuzniel. Yuzniel tried to push aside the thought that Tez might go crazy with jealousy and drive away all the men around her. And what about the last time she danced with the Emperor? Who would dare to accompany her now? Yuzniel realized the situation was quite real. She had grown attached to life here. She had resolved to appear indifferent to him, to not stand in his way. But after seeing Tez again, her heart couldn't stay calm. Yuzniel pondered and decided she would go to the party alone this week, as long as it didn't harm her family. She also thought it best not to get too involved in such events before leaving. At that moment, an assistant's voice snapped her out of her thoughts, "Miss Yuzniel, could you check this for a moment?" She reluctantly went to her colleagues and examined the project's issues. She would try not to leave any traces behind when she left. She would continue to be as indifferent as before. Yuzniel grasped the doorknob and turned back, instructing, "I will go to the academy to consult with the professor about the current obstacles." Some colleagues remarked, "Well, I'll go too." "Miss Yuzniel, haven't you been up all night in the research room?" They murmured to each other, even though it's about magic, sometimes everything weighs on her like a duty, those researches seem to corner her. Seeing her lonely and exhausted figure, her colleagues felt very sympathetic. But Yuzniel remained determined to live separately. She didn't want to leave any wounds on them. At the Magical Academy, Yuzniel was completely alert. She tried to calm herself down and treated this like any other day. However, she glanced at the frightened Gale behind her and felt guilty for her own indifference lately. Yuzniel commanded sternly, "Come to me, Gale." Then she turned to Lily and asked, her voice cold, "Why haven't you answered since earlier? I asked you what you were doing to my sister." Lily, who had been angry before, now looked frightened and trembling at the coldness in Yuzniel's eyes. But after a few seconds, she regained her composure and challenged Yuzniel, "It's just high-ranking students tutoring newcomers. Right from the start, your sister offended me." Her fierce and cunning eyes made Yuzniel uncomfortable. She turned her chin towards Gale, "Isn't that right, Gale Harland?" Gale, trembling, stammered, "Why yes, that's right, sister. I made a mistake with Miss Suni before." Yuzniel growled, "What mistake?" Gale, clutching Yuzniel's clothes, fearfully said, "Let's go home, sister. I really can't handle this." Yuzniel couldn't help but feel pity seeing Gale trembling like this. If she hadn't taken this shortcut back just now, she wouldn't have witnessed this scene. As she approached, her steps faltered upon hearing Lily Suni's harsh voice ordering someone to bow down quickly. Yusniel couldn't believe that she could still be so arrogant after being imprisoned for several days. She almost ignored the situation to avoid the hassle, although she did want to help someone in a vulnerable position. If they hadn't mentioned her sister's name, she might never have realized that Gale was the actual victim. Yusniel's eyes widened in shock and fear at the mention of her sister's name, and she hurried over to rescue Gale. She was already very busy and had no idea about Gale's daily life. How could Gale be so afraid to make a mistake after only hearing a few times? Yusniel reassured the girl, placing her hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, Gale, come home with me." She hugged the girl, comforting Gale as tears of pity fell. Yusniel gently said, "You wait outside for me, I have something to do." Gale trembled and asked, "But what if you get hurt?" "She said she won't let you go." Lily shouted, "I said when." Yusniel didn't respond. She hugged the innocent face of the girl and said, "Gale, do you trust me?" "I'll be fine, wait for me outside." With a faint smile, Yusniel pushed the girl away from the scene, waving reassuringly at Gale as she tried to ask Yusniel to come back quickly. Yusniel's gentle smile vanished as Gale left. Yusniel's eyes turned cold. She leaned down close to Lily's face and growled, "This isn't the first time you've seen Gale's reaction." Lily tried to argue, her face still defiant. "I've said it, it's just a senior student tutoring a newcomer." Before she could finish her explanation, a loud slap resounded, the pain echoing on Lily's face. Lily hadn't even had time to scream, she was dumbfounded. How dare you hit me?" Yusniel coldly retorted, "So what?" The two girls with Lily were terrified, their faces turning pale, quickly running over to help her. "Miss Lily, are you okay?" Blood dripped from Lily's nose, one hand clutching her face, where she was hit, the other propping herself up on the ground. Yusniel stepped closer, saying, "That's right. Think before you speak. Because I'm very restrained right now." With one hand holding Lily's chin, Yusniel pulled her face up and continued, "Lily Suni, a fool like you can only survive with my mercy. Living thanks to my grace, Lily Suni, you fool." The fear made Lily silent as she stared at Yusniel, while the other two girls with her were surprised to learn that their Miss Lily survived because of someone's mercy. Insulted to the extreme, Lily stood up and shouted, "What?" Yusniel didn't let her ramble on, saying, "You better think before you speak. I'm very angry right now." One of the two girls tried to argue back, "Ha! Now that Miss Harland is angry, then the Suni family." Yusniel cut her off, "The reason I'm angry is simple, I'm Eugene's close sister, and I won't tolerate your rudeness anymore. Because I'm a fairy, I won't use force against the weak, and I won't even bother with you a little bit. Do you understand?" Yusniel crossed her arms, looking at Lily with disdain. Then she turned to the other two girls and ordered, "Line up and state your names in order." They trembled and exclaimed, "Us?" They looked at Lily pleadingly, "What do we do, Miss Lily?" Then they decided to listen, stepping forward one by one to say their names. I'm Mimi of the Pia family, and I'm Anna of the Capana family." Yusniel's voice grew stern, "Quickly tell me, what disrespect has Gale shown to Lily Suni?" They stuttered and recounted the incident from their arrival at the academy, during the meeting between Lily and the newcomer. Gale had failed to greet Miss Lily first. Lily couldn't stop them, so she turned away in denial. But Yusniel questioned, "Greeting? The daughter of Count Suni greeting the daughter of Count Harland? And just because of that, you bullied her?" Yusniel, enraged, grabbed Lily's collar and shouted, "Lily Suni! You truly are beyond redemption." Trembling, Lily asked again, "Beyond redemption?" Then she mustered the courage to pull away from Yusniel's grasp, yelling, "Let go. I'll tell my father, you're as good as dead. I'm the future queen of the empire. No one dares to treat me like this." Yusniel sighed disdainfully, "Indeed, the Suni family has raised you this way for the revival of their lineage. Nurturing a youngest daughter with such indulgence, huh?" Lily smoothed her hair arrogantly, "Yes, indeed." Yusniel mocked, "That's why your father came to beg me for your life, isn't it?" Lily, bewildered, asked, "What?" Yusniel smirked, "Your proud father knelt before me, begging for your life. So I asked His Majesty not to execute Lily Suni, the fool. And the result is, you're alive because of me." Lily, horrified, looked at Yusniel with wide eyes, like prey being observed by a wild beast. She desperately protested, "Lies. As Yusniel slowly approached, Lily fell silent. Yusniel continued, I've seen through your thorns. With this appearance, you think you'll become a queen? You cling to the Emperor like that, but he's been Yusniel's since childhood. Hatred flashed in Lily Suni's eyes, you dare. Yusniel sneered, in short, your life depends on Lily Suni. So apologize and beg Gale until your throat is torn. After saying this, she turned and left, leaving Lily in shock, leaning on the other two girls for support. Before leaving, Yusniel reminded, the choice is yours. Outside the carriage, Gale was trembling with fear, her hands clasped together as she waited for Yusniel to return. Sister, why haven't you come back yet? Did something happen? What if they harmed you? The carriage driver leaned down to comfort the girl, Miss Gale, please calm down. Gale whimpered, but if something happens to you because of me, my parents will be so disappointed in me. As she nervously bit her finger, Gale's innocent eyes widened when she heard a familiar, gentle voice, who's hurt? She turned around and ran to hug Yusniel, calling out, Sister, why are you late? I was so worried. Yusniel sighed, just like a fool, worrying about someone like you? Gale protested, calling someone a fool is a bad word. Yusniel patted the girl's head and said, all right, I was wrong. Yusniel wiped the tears from the girl's face and asked, Gale, do you want to get on the carriage and go back first? It's safer with the driver. Gale lowered her head, sadly, yes, I'll be fine either way. But then you'll stay up late again at the Colosseum, won't you? Yusniel replied, no, Why are you reacting like this all of a sudden? Yusniel suddenly realized, gently stroking the girl's head, the magnificent and luxurious capital is still strange to Gale. Father and I are quite busy, so we rarely meet. Turns out Gale has always been alone. My fairy parents don't understand human rules, and father only returns to the castle late. So Gale has nowhere else to turn to for things like this. Yusniel comforted the girl, I'll visit home more often from now on, so you don't need to worry anymore. We'll have more time together now. She smiled softly. This made the innocent eyes of the girl brighten again, full of hope as she asked, really? Yusniel thought to herself about her lies, even if I leave, I must first create strength for Gale. She said, so you go back first and wait for me, alright? She smiled, I have somewhere to go. In the palace, the Emperor's eyes sparkled as he caught a large diamond. He chuckled softly, Yusniel, I couldn't reach you, what happened? Did you come here to see me? Just in time, my work is finished. Do you want to go to the reception hall or the library? Yusniel bowed slowly, following the proper etiquette of noblewomen, and said, I want to see you, your majesty. Tez supported him as he stood up, no need for such formality. He whispered, they've all gone outside anyway. He hurriedly asked, but did you really come to see me? The Emperor's words made several attendants who were leaving turn back in curiosity. Yusniel softly said, yes, I have something to ask of you, your majesty. Tez rejoiced, huh? Ask? What for? Yusniel adjusted her dress and curtsied lightly, following the noblewoman's customs. She said, the meeting hosted by Duke Lantia later this week, please allow me to be your companion, your majesty. The Emperor was so delighted that he didn't even have time to laugh. Yusniel, however, carried a heavy burden of thoughts. For Gale to integrate into high society as quickly as possible, I need the strength of Tez. I'm sorry, Tez, for using you this time. Yusniel hesitated as she thought about Gale being bullied. At that moment, she noticed the girls standing next to Gale showing indifference towards the girl. Yusniel wondered to herself, was Lily Suni being delusional about becoming queen? But what about those other girls? They were merely daughters of lesser noble families, yet they dared to bully the youngest daughter of a prominent duke in the empire? Then Yusniel realized, they were just teenagers who hadn't been exposed to society, and they had a different hierarchy than that of adults. And the parents of these girls understood their psychology well enough to prevent them from being looked down upon at the academy. So from a young age, they organized social gatherings to help them build natural connections and maintain their status. That was the usual way noble families handled things. And because our family was exiled when we were young, our status was lower, so. Yusniel took a deep breath to gather courage and said, at the meeting Duke Lantia is organizing, I want to go as your companion, your majesty. Tez didn't pay much attention to that, he was just so happy to have her here, his lips barely moving. Suddenly, there was a whispering sound from near the door, where two dukes were eavesdropping on their conversation. Yuzniel grabbed Tez's hand and pulled him away, thinking to herself, this can't be discussed here, we need to go somewhere more private. Tez, clueless about how to react to her actions, silently followed Yuzniel. He looked at Yuzniel from behind with intoxicated eyes, as if this were a dream. It was a familiar scene from their childhood. Yuzniel often pulled him like this, making Tez's cheeks blush, his lips curling. They reached a quieter corner. Yuzniel stopped and said, no one can overhear us here. It's absurd to have to run around the palace like this. She tousled her disheveled hair and sighed. Tez stood close to her, grasping Yuzniel's hand, and leaned in gently, calling, Yuzniel. The Emperor gently lifted Yuzniel's beautiful hand. She quickly withdrew it, forgetting that Tezbalin had grown up. Yuzniel awkwardly explained, it's a private matter concerning my little sister, so I didn't want anyone else to hear. That's why I pulled you here, nothing else. Tezbalin nodded, I understand. Yuzniel hurriedly continued, so I'll tell you right here. Tez suddenly closed in on Yuzniel, pressing her against the nearby wall, his hand propped against the wall like a lock, restraining Yuzniel. Tez whispered, but first, let's stand closer. Just like you said. Earlier, you mentioned using me, didn't you? Alright then, go ahead and use me. Yuzniel widened her eyes, looking at the boy in front of her. Now one of his hands was beside her head, the other holding her hand, creating an overly intimate atmosphere. Tezbalin leaned even closer, almost touching Yuzniel's face, and softly said, you know what I'm asking for. Say it again. Yuzniel squirmed, wanting to escape this awkwardness, and whispered to herself, what is it? Tez reiterated, say that you want me to accompany you. Yuzniel's arms were torn between pushing Tez away and touching his tall, sturdy figure. She blushed crimson, her eyes hazy and unsure of what to say, suddenly finding her prepared words evaporating. Tez lowered his head, touching Yuzniel's hair, and said, don't worry, I heard you clearly. Yuzniel grumbled in frustration, I said not to kiss me without my permission. Tez gently stroked her hair strands, chuckling softly. Oh, were you waiting for me? Yuzniel blushed even more, embarrassed that he hadn't even kissed her yet. Tezbalin reached up to caress Yuzniel's soft cheek with his hand, stroking it. Yuzniel pushed him away firmly, that's not happening, get away. The Emperor chuckled, saying with a twinkle in his eye, nope, you still haven't said it again. Yuzniel remained silent for a few seconds before slowly saying, I want you to be my companion at the party, your majesty. Tez's cheeks also flushed, his gaze turning innocent. He chuckled softly at Yuzniel's frustration, and she stood with folded arms, asking, are you satisfied now? Tezbalin replied softly, yes. Yuzniel turned back, asking seriously, why are you so fixated on that? The Emperor chuckled happily, it feels like a dream come true, my dear Yuzniel, you don't understand my feelings. And would you be alright accompanying me there as a partner, my Yuzniel? You wouldn't mind the attention as an Emperor's partner? Yuzniel murmured softly, because you're the Emperor, that's why I have to go with you. She sighed tiredly, this is something I can do for my little sister. On the corridors of the royal castle, they strolled together, the golden sunset pouring down like honey, creating a romantic scene. Yuzniel thought as she walked, I told Tez about this, and wondered what if he got angry, but he's calmer than I thought. He suddenly broke the silence between them, my Yuzniel seems to care more about your sister than I thought. Yuzniel noticed a slight change in his mood, knowing that he was slightly affected by Gale's anger. Tez asked again, so what you mean is that your sister hasn't had any social connections until now. So if she had an Emperor's companion as a sister, would you like to make an impression on the noble society through this opportunity? Yuzniel admitted, and softly said, sorry, Tez. Yuzniel turned away, avoiding Tezbalin's gaze, I said I would use you. Tez cheerfully said, don't apologize, now I see that becoming an emperor is indeed a good thing. Yuzniel asked in surprise, huh? He suddenly lifted Yuzniel, placing her against a wall, gently, saying softly, you know, Yuzniel. If you want, I can kneel happily, but on the contrary, I hope you will control me more. With just a word from you, I can go anywhere. My heart, he pressed his face against Yuzniel's hand, his face warming up, whispering, you understand it well. Yuzniel smirked, about to say something before stopping. She looked down at the Emperor below her, Tez's eyes were like the night. Her hand caressed his cheek with desire. His eyes, since the first time we met, have always been dark, but for some reason, I can't take my eyes off them. Those eyes look at me, seriously and deeply. Tess pleaded, please kiss me, Usniel. I behaved well, so you should reward me. Tess Ballen's gentle gaze resembled a fervent confession. Usniel opened her eyes wide and gazed at his face, unable to think of anything else. When she heard his warm call, Usniel, she leaned her head against his, wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling him close. Usniel had never experienced a truly romantic relationship in her previous life. Her mother had abandoned her frail mother to pursue her lover, leaving Usniel to take care of her, leaving little time for herself and relationships. Then one day, she was approached by a stranger and killed, and everything ended. So she gradually lost faith in people, thinking that love was something that didn't exist. Until she saw the love of her new parents in this world, she gained a bit of trust, but what did that have to do with her? Usniel halted her thoughts. Why was she suddenly thinking about this? When she realized that Tess Ballen was getting too close, pushing her back gently, Usniel hastily said, wait. She felt unable to adapt to the current situation, but she couldn't think of anything else. Her hand was about to push Tess Ballen away from her face, but before she could, a kiss was planted firmly on her lips. His hand gently held hers. The passionate emotion from Tess Ballen's body made Usniel feel dizzy. She wondered, why were they being so reckless, and what would happen afterward? Originally, this shouldn't have happened at all. Usniel's eyes widened with hesitation, but her cheeks remained flushed, and her heart raced. She felt the need to push him away. But it seemed that Tess Ballen sensed Usniel's withdrawal, so he wanted to possess every inch of her even more. His tongue lightly touched Usniel's lips, tasting the sweet flavor of her. Usniel felt almost crazed, but tried not to be swept away by the emotion. She exclaimed, wait, Tess. My mouth. She had never kissed anyone like this before, full of embarrassment and confusion. But Tess Ballen didn't want to stop. He looked at her lovingly and said, I like you, Usniel. Usniel touched her lips, where Tess Ballen's kiss had left them wet, not knowing what to do next. He continued, that's why I can't hold back. Usniel closed her eyes with worry, silent, still pushing Tess away. Tess reassured, but don't worry, in the future, if I don't have your consent, I won't act like this again. Tess ran his hand through Usniel's tangled hair, then gently touched her ear, which was burning as much as her face now. Usniel sighed inwardly, oh, heavens, I'm about to lose control. But Usniel couldn't stop staring at the perfect boy in front of her. Although she had been warned not to let this go too far, as one day she wouldn't be here anymore. But Tess Ballen's eyes were focused on her, full of fascination and allure. His soft voice whispered in her ear, don't you like kissing me? But I really like it. His gentle voice, like a breeze, completely mesmerized Usniel. Usniel felt her head burning so much it was about to burst into flames, and her throat felt dry. Tess Ballen tried to restrain himself, holding Usniel tightly around the waist, burying his head gently on her chest. Usniel lowered her head to face him, blaming herself. Even though she had tried so hard, her heart no longer listened. She felt her body burning up, her hands automatically wrapping around Tess Ballen's neck, embracing him tightly, and their lips had touched each other long ago. Usniel told herself, just this once. She couldn't control herself anymore, all emotions bursting out, letting go of all thoughts and indulging in Tess Ballen's desires at this moment. The sweet sunset blended with their love at this moment. That evening, in the Harland castle, Usniel and Mrs. Seal sat sipping tea in the living room. He told his mother, Mother, I am injured, with a serious expression. However, Mrs. Seal only glanced briefly and then focused on her teacup, gently responding, oh dear, and then. Usniel sighed, I said I was injured, and you only replied like that, Mother? He wondered if his mother already knew what had happened. Mrs. Seal calmly stated, you are injured because you deserved it. She continued seriously, you are a child who has never made mistakes. I believe in you. Nevertheless, she was also very gentle with Usniel, he thought, feeling warmth in her demeanor. Mrs. Seal asked further, where is Gail now? He's playing outside with the servant. Should I call her in? Usniel replied. His mother said, no, let the child play. Usniel, with a guilty expression, admitted, actually, this is related to Gail. I feel like she's being isolated at the academy, and it seems to have started since she enrolled. Mrs. Seal was startled, as if hearing a suspenseful story, then exclaimed, what? Is she isolated? How? Yuzniel frowned. Mother, don't get too excited. Mrs. Seal remained silent for a moment, then asked, are all the things you said true? Yuzniel slowly replied, I've dealt with it already. Don't worry too much. Mrs. Seal bowed her head with seriousness and said, I've made a big mistake. I should have paid more attention to Gale. She always seemed happy, so I thought she was fine. Why didn't she tell us earlier? Yuzniel looked at her silently and said, you and father have always focused on me. I know you care a lot about me, to the point of, too much. Mrs. Seal was stunned by this, a hint of pain in her eyes. Hastily, she said, that's not true, Yuzniel. She thought to herself, the reason we worry about you more is because since you were little, you've been tormented by nightmares, cries for help, and calls of mother, I'm in pain, which made us suffer, watching our little girl in agony without being able to help. She glanced at her now grown-up daughter and still felt worried. She didn't answer Yuzniel's question, why, mother? She just smiled and said, it's nothing. I'll pay more attention to you, Yuzniel. I'll also tell Milan to do so. And as for that, I have my own solution. The hidden card? But you hate it, don't you? They were referring to the Emperor. Yuzniel cheerfully said, it is safe, so don't be surprised if I do something in the future. Mrs. Seal nodded, is that so? I guess it'll be fine if you say it's safe. Yuzniel turned away to hide his worry, thinking his mother wouldn't want to know more. Suddenly, Mrs. Seal asked, Yuzniel, you're the one we care about the most, the one we worry about the most. Yuzniel's eyes widened in surprise, he didn't know how to react. Mrs. Seal continued, so, you have to take better care of yourself. A corner of the door creaked open unnoticed, while Yuzniel was lost in his thoughts. This is the first time my mother has so clearly favored me. He softly replied to Mrs. Seal, yes. Then he heard a soft noise outside the door. What's that? Yuzniel glanced and saw the door slightly ajar with a small ball rolling into the room. It seemed to be Gale's. And so their conversation ended, and a few days passed quickly, leading up to the Lantia family's party. Yuzniel, dressed splendidly, escorted Gale out of the Harland Castle's doors. At this moment, the Emperor stood waiting for her, his gaze completely focused on her. He spoke, I've been waiting for you, my Yuzniel. I've been waiting for you, he reiterated, holding a bouquet of exquisitely crafted green and white flowers. Yuzniel courteously greeted the Emperor. She looked at the things Tess had prepared for her, intricately decorated horse-drawn carriage, knights standing in formation. It was a grand entrance. He said, this is the first time I've seen you since that day. Have you thought about it? Mentioning that day made Yuzniel's cheeks blush, especially with the Emperor standing so close. Gale, curious, asked, what day? Which day, big sister? The Emperor calmly said, oh, it's the day when you and your sister were together. Yuzniel was shocked, while Gale innocently asked again, why are you so startled, Yuzniel? What happened to you? The Emperor chuckled and continued, I mean the day we discussed official matters together. Gale exclaimed in surprise, oh, that's right. Yuzniel covered her tomato-red face with her hand, looking at the gentle face that made her heart beat faster. She whispered to her younger sister, Gale, do you remember what I told you to do when meeting His Majesty? Gale quickly turned back, smiling brightly, and bowed respectfully to the Emperor, saying, greetings, Your Majesty. Tess Balin leaned down to greet Gale with the friendliest expression. Curiously, Gale asked, so, it's true that you and my sister are close? Tess Balin was surprised and asked, true? Close? Gale innocently laughed and said to Yuzniel, oh, I heard about it at the academy. If not, I would have been rude. Yuzniel looked worriedly at her little sister. It must be Lily Suni. The Emperor paused for a second, then tousled Gale's hair and said with a smile, Suni got it right. Yes, your sister and I have a very close relationship. So, I prepared a gift for you, this will be your escort today. He bowed and said, it's an honor to meet the Lady Harland. Gale blushed shyly in front of the handsome young man. Yuzniel instructed Gale's companion, I entrust her to you. If Gale causes any trouble, please inform me. She glanced at them leaving and said, being escorted by the Emperor's knight seems a bit ostentatious, don't you think? We're not royalty, after all. Tess Balin chuckled mischievously, we're about to become a family, aren't we? Yuzniel awkwardly exclaimed, family, what family? Tess Balin whispered enough for both of them to hear, so you were planning to take my virginity, and then leave? that day, I wrapped myself around you. Yuzniel felt too embarrassed to listen anymore. She covered the emperor's mouth, blushing, and said, just keep quiet, don't let others misunderstand. And, you've decided to let today pass quietly, I've agreed to that. Yuzniel remembered that after kissing Tesbalin, they had decided to put a pause on that matter. She bowed her head, admitting her fault. Lately, due to stress, I've been agitated. She babbled a bunch of other nonsense. From the beginning, I said I would take advantage of you, or, no, I mean it's your reward. Suddenly I felt hot. No, I mean. Tesbalin was silent, not knowing whether to laugh or what. He still couldn't contain the sweet emotions on his lips. Yuzniel was utterly confused. She thought, it's over, Tesbalin won't let this opportunity slip away. Why am I feeling like this? This is making me so confused. Tesbalin gently took her hand, placing it on his chest to reassure her, I understand, so let's forget about this. Instead, think about why your body reacted like that. I'll wait for you patiently, I'm good at waiting. At that moment, Tesbalin was also holding Yuzniel's hand dreamily. Yuzniel said, if you say so. But, even so. Blushing, she avoided his gaze. She turned and saw her little sister, happily chatting with the escort knight on the other side, then softly said, thank you for caring for my little sister. It's been a while since I've seen her so happy. Gale didn't seem to be in a good mood lately. I wonder if she heard that conversation between me and my mother, or if I'm just being too sensitive. They got on the horse-drawn carriage and headed to the Lantia castle. Wow! Gale exclaimed. The Duke Lancha's castle is so beautiful. Yuzniel instructed her younger sister, don't run, Gale. Have I not told you what to do? Gale replied, you and His Majesty are childhood friends, very close, and you must be polite in front of others. Yuzniel reminded, so, you must not run around. She then turned to Tesbalin and said, this is my sister's first time attending such events, so I hope you will be understanding. Tesbalin reassured, don't worry, the news will be published throughout the party, and I will keep an eye on the little one, okay? Gale chimed in, that's right, so you don't have to worry. Yuzniel sighed and thought to herself, you two really complement each other's personalities. He curiously asked, the party hasn't even started yet, why do you look so tired? Yuzniel replied in frustration, don't you know why? It's because you two have been chatting nonstop since the beginning. They had been talking throughout the carriage ride, saying how Yuzniel's older sister was the most intelligent and beautiful person in the world. Indeed, Yuzniel had also seen her mesmerizing beauty. Laughter filled the carriage, making Yuzniel extremely embarrassed. In the luxurious courtyard of Lancha's home, everything was extravagant. Gale looked around in awe, wow, even the entrance is decorated like this. The emperor said, the royal garden is even more magnificent, with gemstone dolls and even a gold statue. If you're curious, you can go see it. But you must go with your sister. Gale happily exclaimed, then I will go tomorrow. Yuzniel, annoyed, said, I don't like it. She muttered to herself, can't you behave properly? Tesbalin innocently laughed, what did I do? Gale pleaded with a pitiful look, sister. Yuzniel sighed, not knowing what to do, then replied, fine, you can go next week, but in exchange, you have to behave politely towards the guests today. Gale obediently agreed. Yuzniel looked at her innocent little sister and thought, anyway, this is just a small gathering, so nothing should happen. That's why I chose the Emperor as your dance partner today. Suddenly Gale asked, will Lily Suni be coming? Yuzniel shook her head, she probably still has a swollen face from the beating I gave her last time. Her pride won't allow her to leave the house, will it? Tesbalin stood behind Yuzniel, stifling a laugh. Yuzniel asked coldly, Your Majesty, why are you laughing? Tesbalin chuckled and said, Dear little sister Gale, if the weeds continue to grow, the problem lies with the weeds, not with you. Gale asked innocently, weeds? Yuzniel snapped, what are you saying? She tried to pull her hand away from Tesbalin's grip and muttered, Stop holding my hand sneakily. Yuzniel suspected and asked, Are you sure you don't have any plans? Tesbalin laughed, What plans? Aren't you about to find out? They entered the grand hall of the castle, where the banquet was laid out, amidst the surprise of the guests. As they entered, they came face to face with the Duke of Suni and Lily. Lily, with a still red face, greeted the Emperor with the courtesy of nobility. Yuzniel thought, today's party at Lancha's house is similar to the one Nud and I attended, with fewer people. As they approached, a servant exclaimed in surprise, "Oh." The eldest and second daughters of the Duke of Harland, and Her Majesty's dance partner. This gathering was where young nobles mingled, not too formal. Yuzniel took Tesbalin's arm and walked around. He smiled and said, "Wow, I've frightened the girls. Today I'm just Yuzniel's dance partner, so everyone should relax." Yuzniel glanced around, realizing that this was just a small gathering of young nobles. But the way they organized it this time, and the presence of the dukes, turned this party into a royal affair. Yuzniel turned to Tesbalin and asked, "Did you add something?" She muttered, "I told you not to." Tesbalin replied innocently, "No, I didn't do anything. But I mentioned yesterday about the gathering at Lance's house, didn't I?" He remembered how cheerful he had been yesterday, telling some courtiers that he was looking forward to attending this party. It would be very interesting. They were surprised and asked each other, "Will His Majesty personally attend, and will he go with his dance partner?" Tesbalin modestly said to Yuzniel, "I only boasted about myself, whether they join or not is up to them, I did nothing wrong." He smirked, proving that he was not wrong in bringing those people here. Yuzniel frowned, unable to blame him. If anyone, she could only blame herself for inviting the emperor. In another corner, Gale and the escort knight also attracted the attention of the guests. A woman brought her daughter over and introduced her to Gale. "Hello, this is my daughter." Gale replied cheerfully, "You're a senior student at Colosseum, right?" She quickly attracted another boy to make friends with, feeling happy about being accepted. Yuzniel felt reassured about that. Gale adapted to the atmosphere here quickly. Today they treated her quite warmly, so she became lively again like before. Yuzniel sighed in relief. "Things are smoother than I thought, thankfully." Tesbalin turned to her, gently tucking a strand of hair near her ear, and whispered, "It's time to have fun with me now. I'm bored." Yuzniel couldn't stand the heat from Tesbalin's breath spreading all over her body, making her cheeks flush, quickly pushing Tesbalin away. "Tess, you should leave now. If someone sees us, it will be troublesome." He turned away angrily, "But you've been staring at Gale all this time." "I'm jealous." Yuzniel looked at him in astonishment. He was really crazy. He was also ashamed to say that. However, Yuzniel fell into another trap. The more she looked at him, the more she found him cute with that expression. Yuzniel hugged her head to calm herself down. Tesbalin, curious about her confusion, asked, "Are you not feeling well?" Yuzniel opened her eyes wide and worriedly said, "Oh no, it seems like he has realized something now, scared of her own emotions. Do I like him?" He brushed Yuzniel's hair gently. Yuzniel exclaimed, "Tess, I..." Just as the conversation began, a voice from behind interrupted, "May I have an audience, Your Majesty, and Miss Harland?" It was the Duke of Sunni and Lily. Tess and Yuzniel turned to them. The Duke of Sunni led his daughter in front of the emperor. Yuzniel was somewhat surprised by their presence, forgetting what she was about to say to Tess. "I didn't expect to be sobered up by Duke Sunni." The emperor looked down at the blonde girl in front of him, slowly saying, "Yes, this is not Lily, the one who always claims she will be my future queen?" Lily's eyes widened in fear. At this moment, her father pressed her shoulder down low, respectfully saying, "I heard that my daughter has caused trouble with the Harland family, so she wants to apologize to Miss Harland for temporarily taking her position." Yuzniel was somewhat embarrassed before looking at the Duke of Sunni's distress. As for the emperor, he remained silent, waiting for a moment, then said, Isn't this a bit strange? The one who caused the mistake hasn't even greeted Princess Harland yet. It seems like the third daughter of Duke Sunni doesn't even know how to bow, right? If she doesn't know, I can personally teach her." A sword was drawn, making a sharp sound from the scabbard of the knight standing next to Gale. "What now?" Tesbalin reminded. Oh, sweat poured out on the Duke of Sunni's face, stammering, urging Lily, quickly apologize to the princess. But the more he tried to press her head down, the more stubbornly she raised her head challengingly. "Father, how can you do this to me? Don't talk nonsense, hurry up and apologize." But Lily stubbornly refused. Gale saw the tense situation and rushed back to grab Yuzniel's sleeve. Yuzniel rubbed her head. "Don't worry, I've arranged everything." Then she turned to the emperor and said, "That's fine, Your Majesty. I don't need an apology from Miss Lily. This is my precious sister's first gathering, so I don't want to leave any bad memories for her. However, even though Your Majesty hasn't announced it, and Miss Lily has claimed to be your future queen, this arrogant behavior needs to be corrected." Balin stepped forward next to her and said, Princess Harland is right, the Sunni family doesn't discipline their children strictly, so they need to pay the price, wait for the punishment. This made everyone at the party shocked. They whispered, shouldn't mess with the Harland family now. As you can see, His Majesty is favoring her by organizing this party like this. Because His Majesty attended the party as Princess Yusniel's dance partner, he replaced her to demand fairness. In another corner of the party, a guest with light blonde hair was about to take a sip of wine, suddenly stopped, murmuring softly, Yusniel, is that girl Yusniel?